喺民主派初選因為串謀顛覆國家政權罪服刑期滿嘅民主黨前主席胡志偉，上個星期喺倫敦希斯路機場入境嘅時候，被英國邊境處扣留同埋沒收護照，只係准臨時入境7日。後來喺英國政界人士同內政部周旋之後，胡志偉最終獲酌情處理，同一般持 BNO 護照入境嘅旅客一樣，可以留英6個月。
我喺過境嘅時間、入境嘅時間，呢個移民局佢覺得就話懷疑我嗰個嘅入境嘅 purpose 嘅問題，咁因此咧就唔接納我係有一個 genuine 嘅係 visitor 嘅 status。
我哋取得英國邊境處當日向胡志偉發出嘅拒絕入境通知書，負責嘅邊防人員當日唔信納胡志偉係真旅客。通知書指，雖然知道佢5年冇見過屋企人，明白家庭團聚重要，但係喺問話期間，胡志偉話知道有 BNO 移民路徑，但係因為想盡快同家人團聚而冇選擇喺到英國之前申請移民。雖然佢冇意圖非法逗留英國，但係因為有考慮喺英國作旅客期間尋求永久逗留，呢個削弱咗胡志偉作為真旅客嘅可信性。邊防人員指胡志偉並唔符合英國入境守則附件5旅客喺入境時計劃喺旅程後離開英國嘅規定。呢個對於真旅客嘅要求同 BNO 護照持有人可以喺英國境內申請 BNO 簽證嘅做法，似乎有不兼容嘅地方。英國內政部基於人道保護推出 BNO 簽證5+1計劃，同大部分其他簽證需要喺境外申請唔同。BNO 簽證有特別安排，接受申請人喺英國境內以旅客身份申請。根據內政部數字，自從 BNO 計劃推出至今年嘅首季，總共批出咗超過23萬個簽證，超過17萬人已經嚟到英國展開新生活。喺批出嘅 BNO 簽證入邊，其中有22%係喺英國境內提出申請，而今年首季更加係第一次出現喺英國境內申請同批出簽證嘅人數比較喺境外申請嘅仲要多。喺胡志偉事件入邊，曾經介入同內政部接觸嘅對中政策跨國議會聯盟 IPAC 行政總監裴倫德接受我哋訪問嘅時候，指英國嘅入境制度一團糟，前線人員特別對香港政治檢控認知不足。佢提醒香港人，如果打算喺入境英國之後先至申請 BNO 簽證，一定唔可以喺入境時講出嚟。我哋聽下佢點講。
So Luke, we know that you have met with the Home Office together with Lord Alton of Liverpool over Wuchi White's case. What was the key message you took away from those discussions?
Well, I think it's important to say that this case came up at very short notice, and I really learned about it over a weekend. Generally speaking, in a recess, a parliamentary recess, which we're currently in, it's hard to get responses from ministers, especially over a weekend. So this was quite difficult because we knew that the deportation order had been scheduled for Wednesday of that week, and that doesn't give much time to work things through. Okay, so like generally, when it comes to immigration stuff, things take a long time. So reviewing things very urgently, especially on a weekend, is not so straightforward. What I would say is that in my experience of having dealt with cases like these, and quite a lot of them, there are a few ways of approaching it. One way is to write a letter in order to try to get some ministerial attention. But in a case like this, where the time was very short, I knew that we had to get direct contact with the minister and very quickly. So to his great credit, and we have to say that Lord Hanson, who's a Labour minister in the Lords, who looks after this area for the Home Office, he responded on a Sunday, which is very unusual, and he acted immediately. And on Monday, by mid-morning on Monday, he had sorted it out. So a lot of the credit around this is due to him, but the content of the conversations was merely to set out the case, to set out that we saw this as a scandal, that we could not have a situation where somebody who had suffered enough under an unjust prison sentence in Hong Kong wasn't able to enter and avail himself of a scheme which was clearly intended for people like him. And Although the minister could not say that he agreed with us, we're pretty sure that he did because he acted very quickly on it. So it consisted in a number of emails between me and then drafting a letter for Lord Alton, which Lord Alton sent, and a very rapid response from the minister, and then a few follow-ups to try to work out where the case had got to. So that was it. I mean, less than meeting in person, because there wasn't time for that. It was all done over email correspondence.
From what you understand, at what point do they become convinced that the refused entry decision should be reversed?
I think it was fairly immediate as soon as it was raised to his attention. The important thing to understand is that our immigration system is a mess. It's dealing with millions of cases, and it has to make judgments which are very finely nuanced with very little information, and it often gets them wrong. There are broader issues around the way that Hong Kong cases are being assessed at the moment, and we can come back to that. But I think as soon as the case had been raised to the minister clearly took it in hand and could see that something had gone badly wrong here and investigated it. So I don't think it took a lot of persuasion. I think the minister was minded to agree as soon as he knew the facts. The advantage of this is that Lord Alton and Lord Hanson have a very good relationship. We have pursued a number of amendments in the House of Lords recently that Lord Hanson has had to respond to. There have been good negotiations. There's a trusting relationship. So Lord Hanson knows that if Lord Alton writes to him and says, these are the facts of the case, that they are actually the facts of the case and that he can act on trust. So trust is extremely important in the economy of parliamentary advocacy, basically. And I would say that that's the reason, the strength of that relationship was the reason that this was able to be acted upon so quickly.
Do you see this is an error and an isolated error by Border Force, or does it expose a wider problem in how the BNO scheme is being implemented? Because it seems that the Home Office allows eligible BNO status holders to apply for a BNO visa from within UK as a visitor. Yet a visitor must also satisfy the as a genuine visitor requirement. Do you see these two policies sit comfortably together?
That's an excellent question. No, they don't sit comfortably together. And the broader problem, the broader malaise, is that we have a border force who have to try to assess applications on the basis of rules as they understand them, which don't neatly fit into analysis of the national security law and various ordinances or public order offences in Hong Kong. Because the UK government doesn't recognise those offences, but Border Force doesn't necessarily know that they don't recognise them. And as we know, the Hong Kong authorities have a habit of trying to cloak political persecution in what would seem to be superficially legitimate crimes. So it can be very confusing for Border Force, especially if they're not adequately trained. I think my big takeaway from this case is that clearly they're not adequately trained to recognise the nuances of Hong Kongers having to seek refuge in the UK and to try to benefit from the BNO visa scheme. But this is not an isolated case. I mean, I think that since 2020, I have certainly personally dealt with at least 50 cases, which have been hard cases of people coming over from Hong Kong and have sort of fallen between the cracks one way or the other, haven't completely met the criteria, or there's been some other issue, many types of issues. And that has required political intervention many, many times in order to get these cases ironed out at ministerial level. What people need to understand is that the Border Force, I don't want to disrespect them, they have a hard job, but the Border Force are essentially bureaucrats who apply rules. And a lot of them seem to enjoy saying no. They will have to defer, to ministerial pressure, which is why very often to solve these cases, we have to go to ministers to ask them to intervene. That was the case with Chihuahua. But the broader problem here is that we have people who are dealing with cases very regularly at the border who do not understand the context that people from Hong Kong are coming from, so they make mistakes very regularly. And there is a lack of clarity in the rules, and there's certainly a lack of adequate training. So his case is not isolated. There are a whole bunch of other cases right now of people who have been previously convicted in Hong Kong for spurious, politically motivated prosecutions, who have been refused leave to remain in the UK on that basis. Too many of them. So clearly there's a problem, and that's something that needs to be ironed out. I think what I would say to your viewers is that together with other organisations, because Lord Alton's intervention on Wuchi Wai's case was certainly critical, but he wasn't alone in seeking to try to raise concern around the case. Other organisations are also well aware of this problem. So Hong Kong Watches, the Committee for Freedom in Hong Kong, is Hong Kong Aid very much aware of these problems. And we will be seeking to ensure that ministers take them seriously and find a solution very soon.
While for the inconsistency between the immigration rules and the BNO route, as we have just mentioned, it affects those people who face political prosecutions. But at the same time, actually, it also affects people who does not face political prosecution, but just holding a BNO passport and intends to apply for a BNO visa after entering the UK. So in your view, should a BNO passport holder who intends to apply for a BNO visa after entering the UK to apply within the UK still be regarded as a genuine visitor?
So let me be really clear about this. I think that there has not been adequate advice, particularly for those who have been convicted of various so-called crimes in Hong Kong. There has not been adequate advice for them. I would issue this advice. I would say that when you are coming to the UK, if your intention eventually is to apply for the BNO visa in the UK, and you can come to the UK as a visitor, then just come to the UK as a visitor. Do not say to the border force that you are thinking eventually of applying for BNO, because that is confusing. It makes it look as if you're coming to the UK under false pretenses. And you are not doing that, because clearly the scheme has been designed to allow you to do that. But for the length of time that we are in at the moment, where we're dealing with a border force that doesn't understand these nuances, they just need to know that you're here visiting. And if you end up applying for a BNO visa while you are here, that is perfectly legitimate. But if you get to the border and it looks as if you're coming to the UK to visit, and then you say, well, actually, I'm going to apply for my BNO visa while I am here, that will immediately flag to border force that you are in the country under false pretenses. Don't do that, would be my strong advice. We are not in a position to do that until border force is better trained. If you're coming to the UK as a visitor, come as a visitor, and that's what you say. And if while you're in the UK, you end up deciding that you want to apply for your BNO visa, then you are entitled to do so under that scheme. And I think that's important advice which has not been given to many people. In my experience, Hong Kongers, when they come to the UK, are honest to border force. They're an honest group of people, and that's a good thing. But you can over-disclose in these situations in a way that creates difficulty for you, which is unnecessary. Avoid that by visiting the UK and then applying while you are here, which you are entitled to do.
Should Home Office publicly clarify that intending to apply for a BNO visa does not by itself make someone ineligible to enter as a visitor? Or
Yes, absolutely, they need to do that. The reason that we're in this mess is that the guidance from the Home Office is not adequate. The problem is that the Home Office is under very heavy pressure, and any Home Secretary will be under very heavy pressure to reduce levels of migration to the UK. So we're basically dealing with an exceptional group here, the Hong Kong BNO group. And the UK has not wanted to clarify that they're an exceptional group. And it's certainly not wanted to do that publicly, because that sends signals which are very badly received by a group of voters in the UK who want to see immigration lowered. Understandably, they've got their argument. But the Hong Kong BNO scheme is a very exceptional scheme. It's not something which has been set up for any other constituency. So if we're going to do this, we need to ensure that the rules are clear. And certainly we'll be pushing the government to make that clearer. In the interim, I believe that Hong Kong interest groups should themselves be issuing guidance based upon their experience with some of these hard cases to tell people what to expect and how to manage it. Yes, of course, there needs to be clearer guidance from the UK Home Office. They're not going to want to do that for political reasons, okay? And they're also not going to want to do something that feels like it's unnecessarily upsetting Hong Kong and China because of the current government's posture, unfortunately. So while we're waiting for that to be sorted out, and while people are campaigning for that to be sorted out, we have to ensure that the advice that goes to people in Hong Kong, especially those who have been convicted, is good advice. And I'm not aware of any advice in the public domain for people who have been convicted so that it's constructive for them to be able to benefit from the B&O scheme without falling into these problems.
What's the next step and the planning for IPAC to have some more lobbying to the Home Office, or what's your plan for that?
Well, I think the important thing to say is that, IPAC doesn't really do lobbying in the sense that IPAC is the politician members, but politician members of IPAC, our lawmaker members, are certainly resolute across all parties and in both houses of parliament that this needs to be sorted out. There were many who wrote to the Home Office about even Wu Chi-wai's case, but that was after it had already been sorted out. But for various reasons, it couldn't be disclosed. So there were letters that flew in after it had been ironed out. But it doesn't matter. The point is there was a lot of interest. And it's quite clear that there is a desire to ensure that this doesn't keep happening. So there is political interest in sorting it out. That's what I would say, number one. The concrete next step is a meeting with the minister to try to set out the existing cases we're currently dealing with of ex-convicts who have been people who have suffered spuriously under political persecution, who have been denied leave to remain because of it. There are a number of those cases that need to be sorted out, and we're in the process of securing a ministerial meeting with other interest organizations too, to try to find a solution. I think after the Hong Kong Economic and Trade Office convictions, there has been a suspicion within Hong Kong communities that what's happened in these cases is the product of infiltration or some kind of conspiracy. I can understand why people feel that after the Hong Kong Economic and Trade Office cases, but I really don't think that's what's going on here. Unfortunately, our immigration system is a mess. It's a complete mess. It's trying to deal with many more cases than it has the ability to deal with at a level of nuance that it is simply not trained to address. That is why this keeps happening. It's important to underline here that as much as we may have problems with the current government's China policy, this case was sorted out by a Labour minister who acted very quickly and over a weekend to help with it. And I'm convinced that that same minister is going to try to help to find a solution. I understand that the community will want to point towards conspiracy. I don't think that's what's happened here. The real answer is much more mundane. And it is, unfortunately, within the fact that the border force is not fit for purpose. Let's be honest about it. These are people who I'm sure are working hard to the best of the ability, but they are not adequately trained to deal with these cases, and they are overloaded. That is why we're in this mess. We were in this mess and continue to be. So I just encourage people, don't be tempted towards thinking that this is all some kind of conspiratorial thing. That flatters the situation. It's incompetence more than conspiracy. And the way to sort it out is to ensure that ministers take it in hand, and we're working on that.
Thank you. Thanks, Luke.
No problem.
I think we have covered most of the issues